Inverse of quartic function. Determine inverse of function y equals to x square minus 1 whole square. Explain how you can restrict the function to ensure that its inverse is also a function. So basically we have two parts to this question. The first one is to find inverse of the quartic function, and the second one is to restrict the given function so that we have inverse also as a function. Now we have given you a diagram, but in case you had to sketch one, you could do it easily by factoring, right? So you could write y as equals to x plus 1 times x minus 1. That gives you x square minus 1, and whole square basically means that these two are squared, correct? So that is how you have your polynomial. At x equals to 0, the value is 1. So that is what it is. So that's how you get your even quartic function. Now let's try to find out the inverse of this function, right? Let's do the first part, and that is inverse. To find the inverse, what we need to do is to swap x and y, right? So we are given the function y equals to x square minus 1 whole square. To find inverse, we will change y with x and x with y. And now we can solve for y. Square root, whenever you do square root, you need to do plus and minus, right? Plus and minus square root of x will give you y square minus 1, and then you can bring 1 to this side. So you get 1 plus and minus square root of x equals to y square. And what is y equals to? Y is equals to square root of all this. So square root, again with plus and minus sign, you get 1 plus and minus square root of x whole under the square root. So that is how you can find the inverse, right? Now let's work with the inverse function, and we have the inverse function as y equals to, let me write y inverse, right, is equals to plus and minus square root of 1 plus and minus square root of x. So it's a combination of 4 different functions, as you can see, right? So one function you could write as with plus sign, right? Let's write down functions with plus sign first. So we could write this as a function with plus sign, which is square root of 1 plus square root of x, right? That could be one function. This second function could be with plus sign and minus inside. So let me write that function as square root of 1 minus square root of x, okay? And the third and fourth function, let's use the negative sign this time. So negative, and let's say the outside function, which is 1 plus square root of x. And then we'll use the negative with inside of outside, okay, which is 1 minus square root of x. So basically you'll find that your inverse is combination of these 4 functions, right? Let's make it very clear by sketching it on the graph. Let's start with the very first one, which is plus, right? That means we are considering this half and positive sides. So if you have to do inverse of this function, the point here is 1 and 0. When you flip it, it comes to 0 and 1. So it gets reflected and comes here. This is the line y equals to x. Your function or the graph of the function is reflected on y equals to x to get the inverse. So what we can do is we can choose the other point as this, right? So from here I will just draw a function which is kind of like this. So this represents the right side of my graph from 1. So that part could be shown as the pink line shown here. So that becomes the inverse. That's the first part. Now let's consider the next part, which is from 1 to 0, right? 1 to 0. So now we are considering this half of the function. Now again, this point is 0 and 1. When it flips, it comes to that portion. Is it okay? and 1 and 0 will be here. So we are flipping the graph over the line y equals to x, right? So it comes to, so it is kind of like this. I mean, we make a curve here and like this, right? So that becomes this half of the graph. So that side comes reflected here, this side is reflected on the other side, and line of reflection is y equals to x for us. Now let's look into the third part of this graph. Third part means we are looking into this side, right? So this side is minus 1 and 0, that means 0 and minus 1, so it gets up to this place. Now from the symmetry we know it should look like this, correct? So that is how it is. And now the last part, which is from minus infinity to minus 1. Okay, so let me say that part. Now when you reflect minus 1, 0, it will come at 0 and minus 1, so that is the point. And we can choose some other point and then just reflect. So let us say we have a point here, and if you go diagonally like this, 1 and a half, half and a 1, so we kind of reach here, right? So we can draw a line which is kind of like this. So as you see, this becomes the inverse of our function. Okay, so that is the inverse of the function. Now how to restrict this so that we get inverse also as a function? So as you can see, the restriction could be in the given fashion. We could restrict the domain of the function as x greater than 1, right? So if I restrict domain of the function as x greater than 1, then I get inverse as 1 plus square root x. So our restrictions could be like this. So one of the option is that we restrict our domain to x greater than equal to 1, right? So that is what we get. In that case, we get this part of the graph, right? So this is square root of 1 plus square root of x. The other restriction is that we can have domain between 0 to 1 of our function. So we are restricting domain of the function, right? So we say, well, x is greater than equal to 0 but less than equals to 1. So that is the next part, right? Or we could restrict the domain of the function as, let me write down here, as from minus 1 to 0. That means x is greater than equal to minus 1 and less than equals to 0, right? You may or may not include these points, but there is no harm in including them. It's good to include them so that you have a reference point to start with. And the fourth restriction could be from minus infinity to minus 1. That means x is less than equals to minus 1. In all these four cases, we get part of our inverse function, and each part will now satisfy the vertical line test, correct? So that is how you could restrict your function. Now, have a good look at it, try to understand what we did, and then answer my question. If I give you a question that find inverse of this particular function, so what is the inverse of square root of 1 minus square root x? Can you answer that part? So try to answer that, okay? Thank you and all the best.